Private Eye, 6 decades of jokes and journalism.
Hello and happy birthday to us. It was 60 years ago today, on 25th October 1961, that the very first edition of Private Eye was published. But today we're not looking back that far because this is the 7th of these episodes in which we dip into the pages of Private Eye, the 60 Yearbook. It's just been published and it charts how the magazine covered all the big events of the last 6 decades in jokes and in journalism. Today it's the turn of the last 10 or 11 years, 2010 to 2021. No one's sure what they're called, the tens, the teens, the whatevers. Anyway, here's Adam Macqueen, the editor of the book, to get us caught up with what was going on in the period we've just been talking about. 60 seconds, Adam, from now.
I don't need 60 seconds, really. Very, very, very quiet on the news front. Hardly anything at all, to be honest. You could say there was a little bit of politicians catching up on stuff that the Eye had been going on about for ages. Things like PFI being useless and tax avoidance by massive corporations helped by the tax authorities. Oh, and phone hacking on the tabloids. That became quite a big story as well, didn't it? And there was that thing where the post office imprisoned hundreds and hundreds of its staff for fraud and a few things like that. But no, otherwise, pretty quiet.
We kicked off with a new government, the first coalition government for 65 years.
Unbeatable coalition deal.
Vote for one party.
And get one free.
And get one free.
So please welcome the unbeatable coalition who are going to be helping us to celebrate today. Lewis Macleod, Harry Enfield and Jan Ravens. So we may have misled you. The years 2010 to 2021 may actually have been quite eventful. Early on, the spotlight fell on a previous decade.
Welcome to the 6 o'clock news. I'm Fiona Bruce. It was confirmed last night that police have arrested the 1970s, which are currently being held for questioning. Inspector Naka, head of Operation U-Tree, announced that police now believe the entire decade colluded with the stars of the day by being a very different era from the modern day. He has refused to rule out the arrest of later decades as the inquiry continues. Meanwhile, a senior spokesman for the NHS has defended the long delays to treating the Jimmy Savile scandal seriously and encouraged investigators to continue concentrating on the BBC instead.
The delays of up to 40 years to get any attention for this story are in no way the NHS's fault.
Reads the statement.
There is, unfortunately, a very long waiting list of people wanting not to explain why Jimmy Savile was given a bed in a children's ward and given free rein to wander around hospitals in the middle of the night with no questions asked. It is very sad that these very old stories eventually died a natural death, and no one could possibly have expected them to be resuscitated in 2012.
Meanwhile, as far as certain sectors of the media and politics were concerned, there was an even bigger danger lurking: the curse of wokeness, which was apparently even overtaking institutions as traditional as the National Trust. One of the Eye's longest-serving contributors has been Sir Herbert Gussett, a retired gentleman living deep in one of the darker corners of Somerset, who helpfully copies us in on letters he has sent to the editor of the Daily Telegraph. No Private Eye performance would be complete without the long-serving fourth member of our cast, John Sessions, performing Sir Herbert. John sadly died far too young last November, but here, recorded at the National Theatre in 2017, he is, with a letter from keen National Trust volunteer, Sir Herbert Gussett.
Sir, my good lady wife and I have been supporters of the National Trust for over 100 years. And indeed, for the last 30 years, have been volunteer guides at the charming Jacobean country house, Wolfenden Hall, where we happily welcomed guests of every description to the property. You can imagine our dismay when we were suddenly instructed last week, on pain of being demoted to serving in the gift shop, that we had henceforth to wear a garish rainbow badge bearing the logo "I'm LBCBTQI." This was, we were told, part of the National Trust's ill-advised house and gay den initiative, in which it attempted to woo the so-called pink pound by rewriting the history of some of its most treasured properties in a more inclusive manner. As someone who knew the late owner of Wolfenden Hall, Cedric Wimple St. John Screamer, I was appalled by the attempt of the politically correct brigade to try and claim Cedric as a gay hero. Cedric was a quiet, unassuming bachelor who wrote poetry and had a number of close friends in the creative and artistic community. There was never any suggestion during his life that he might be homosexual. And indeed, the matter was never referred to by him, and certainly not by those of us amongst his acquaintance who used to drop into the hall of an evening to drink sherry and listen to his collection of Judy Garland long-playing records. I do hope that we can now put this matter behind us and once again concentrate on educating our visitors about the delights of Wolfenden Hall, including Cedric's historic collection of Arab teapots amassed on his visits to Tunisia and Morocco. Yours screamingly, Sir Herbert Gazette.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sessions.
The much-missed John Sessions. The referendum on Scottish independence in 2014 resulted in a narrow majority for no, with Her Majesty the Queen being given some of the credit.
The Queen has been condemned by the Yes campaign for expressing a hope that Scottish voters will think very carefully about the future in the run-up to the referendum. SNP leader Alex Salmond gave this response while posing for a photo with a bowl of porridge on his head.
This just shows how out of touch Her Majesty is with her subjects north of the border. To suggest that the Scottish people should think very carefully about anything is an insult to the Scottish people. We are a brave, doughty, handsome, lovely, passionate people who don't believe in thinking carefully about anything. The very fact that I'm here as your First Minister shows what a proud, unthinking race we are.
That referendum did such a good job of bringing the nations together that David Cameron decided what we all really needed was another referendum 2 years later. Chancellor George Osborne made the financial case for the Remain campaign.
Treasury figures make it very clear how dangerous it would be to put at risk the crippling austerity that has strangled all hope in the country since 2010. If Britain votes leave, the UK economy could sink overnight. It would be far safer to allow it to sink slowly and painfully under my stewardship.
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage made the emotional case on behalf of Leavers.
Look, no. The thing, I'm not going to apologise for our breaking point poster. The fact is, it's united the whole nation. Of course, it was easy to get the Remain camp to hate me, but to actually get Michael Gove and Boris Johnson from the Leave campaign condemning me too, well, that's a bit special, I've got to say. People from all sides of the political spectrum have come together to call my poster inflammatory, divisive and xenophobic. But I have no problem with that. I love getting compliments.
The new Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, set about ensuring that his party reflected the nation by being split down the middle and full of fear and loathing.
A lot of journalists from the Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail and the Sun have been asking me why I consort with members of Hamas, Hezbollah and the IRA. My answer to that is that my philosophy is always to talk to everyone, even those people you profoundly disagree with, because only that way can you get your message across. However, I refuse on principle to speak to journalists from the Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail and the Sun. So I'd be grateful if someone would pass this message on to them.
Meanwhile, in the Eye, the new headmistress of St Teresa's School, which had been put into special measures, ran into trouble over some policies she had instigated in her previous job.
Hello. Or if you are Miss Rudd, goodbye. Miss Rudd's resignation apparently came as something of a surprise to her, as apparently did everything else going on in her department. In short, a number of our Caribbean pupils may well have experienced some minor difficulties, such as being expelled for doing nothing wrong, being refused treatment in the sanatorium, or being refused entry back into the school after their holidays with their parents. So it's only right and proper that someone should take the blame. I hold my hand up and say that I was head of discipline during the time that the pupils in Windrush House were frog-marched to the school gates and put on a bus marked "Go Home." But this was entirely the fault of the then head teacher, Mr. Cameron. Now that I am head teacher, I have introduced a new and improved system whereby the problems with the Windrush pupils are entirely the fault of the new head of discipline, Miss Rudd. Miss Rudd has apologised a number of times, although unfortunately we don't have a precise record of exactly how many due to a number of documents in the headmistress's office having been shredded. I have, however, decided that Miss Rudd has to be sent back where she came from.
But when Brexit finally defeated Theresa May in 2019, it was time for a new Prime Minister to have a go.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Facebook. It's People's Question time again, as usual, prepared from a short list of genuine questions the general public might have asked had they been Dominic Cummings. First question is from Mr. Ian Vented Name.
Could you explain your simple and brilliant plan to solve the gridlock over the Northern Ireland backstop?
In a word, Ian, yes. What we do is keep Northern Ireland inside the customs union, but not in the single market. Or is it in the single union and not the customs market? Either way, we don't have a border. We have two borders, one in the sea and one invisible. So there aren't any checks on the border because there isn't one. There are two.
Isn't this just Theresa May's plan with a different name, though?
Absolutely not. The key difference is that chummy Vradkar seems to have bought it this time. So the only one we've got to convince now is Jean-Claude Juncker. And if we get him after lunch, he'll be signing anything. Resultio. Now, the next question is from an Arlene Foster from Ulster.
Will there be checks on goods travelling from Northern Ireland and the mainland of Britain?
Well, the simple answer to this, Arlene, is no. Or to put it in the lingo that you'll understand, no!
That's not true, is it, you shifty lying feck?
Well, no, Arlene, let me be honest with you. There will be checks, but they won't really be checks as such. The whole process will be more like filling in a few pieces of paper, possibly as few as 100, while swimming across the Irish Sea, and you won't even notice the frictionless bureaucratic intervention because it'll be so jolly high-tech. Now, I've been taking advice from my technology advisor, Jennifer Arcuri, and there was definitely nothing frictionless about my trade-offs with her. Next question, and this comes from a Ms. Carrie Simons of Downing Street.
What was that about Jennifer Arcuri?
Cripes.
Facebook Live has unexpectedly prorogued. Connection lost.
And when coronavirus arrived on our shores early in 2020, the Prime Minister swiftly imposed strict new rules and restrictions on the entire nation, except for his chief advisor, Dominic Cummings. Over to the Rose Garden at Downing Street.
Oh, I've been asked to give a statement, so here goes. I did nothing wrong. The media are to blame. Now fuck off. Oh no, I was told to cut that last bit. Right, that's it. Any questions? No, hang on. It's not that bit yet. Oh, I've got to read you this very, very long and plausible alibi involving my desperately ill wife, my vulnerable child, the terror threat to my home, my elderly parents and selfless nieces, my tragic loss of eyesight, bluebells, toilet stops, historic landmarks, and the invasion of aliens. Actually, we decided to drop the aliens as they sounded too plausible. Anyway, on March 27th, I did nothing wrong. On March 28th, I made the decision to do nothing wrong again. For the next 9 days, I did nothing wrong. Once or twice during that period, I may have done nothing wrong. So, does anyone from the media want to defend why they have misreported all this? Yeah, you from the BBC. That still exists, does it? Not for long.
Mr. Cummings, you say you drove 260 miles while suffering coronavirus symptoms to ensure you had childcare. But why couldn't you ask friends in London to look after your child?
I don't have friends.
Actually, that does sound pretty convincing.
Meanwhile, the rest of the government continued to manage the emergency situation brilliantly. Coronavirus, some worrying figures.
You are in safe hands if we can find enough gloves.
The only thing you can pin on me is my badge.
With this new financial package, jobs will be secure, particularly mine.
Oh, I'm 190,000% confident in this government, I really am.
The virus is nearly as dangerous as me.
I have had the disease and I am now immune from criticism.
And perhaps too neatly, that really is the theme of the last 60 years about people in power not being immune from criticism. That's it for now. Obviously, I'm going to say please buy the 60 Yearbook, which is a terrific read. And if you don't fancy that, the magazine is slightly cheaper. And huge thanks to Adam Macqueen, the editor of the book, who compiled it. And huge thanks to our performers for this evening, Harry Enfield, Jan Ravens, and Lewis Macleod, and also all the writers of the jokes they've been performing over all those years. Richard Ingrams, Christopher Booker, Barry Fantoni, John Wells, Peter Cook, Nick Newman, Tom Jameson, Nev Fountain, Andrew Hunter-Murray, Giles Pilbrow, Colin Swash, Uncle Tom Cobley, who I think did a few in the 70s, and everyone else. Anyway, happy birthday to us. Thank you very much and good night.
Private Eye, 6 decades of jokes and journalism. On sale now.